Field Note 86.151. Facing conflict is not the opposite of peace. It often is the beginning of it.
It's not just the answers, not just the quotes. It's life in the margins. It's time for CluffsNotes. There was this time when conflict felt like failure. Growing up, I became the peacemaker in the chaotic world that I lived in. Someone who could reframe, redirect, divert the tension. I learned well from my dad, the peacemaker. And that coping skill served me well until it didn't. It wasn't just silence that I learned, it was a type of survival. Silence is a virtue. Silence is loyalty. And yet silence often just protected the lie, not the love. And I carried that into adulthood, into my marriage, ministry, even into fatherhood. But things shifted slowly and stubbornly. When I stepped out of this life I built, I had to start telling the truth. Not the loud, combative kind of truth, the kind that says, this happened, this hurt, this is who I am. And I wasn't proud of everything I had to share. There were parts of me I wished that weren't true. I had begged God to change me. I would have gladly taken a pill at that time to make me quote unquote normal. For a long time, I even convinced myself that those parts weren't true. But what I learned is it's not about shame. It's about freedom. I just began to trust myself. And when there's trust, you can start facing conflict in a healthier way. I remember reading this book, No More Mr. Nice Guy. It's a book I still recommend. I even mentioned it back in season 1. And it hit me hard, not because it was some kind of big revelation, but because it named a pattern that I had been living for decades, trying to manage other people's perception of me so I could stay safe and get what I needed. I had twisted things in my head to survive that kind of mental dissidence. But when I started stepping into conflict with presence and not avoidance, and I trusted that my intentions were coming from a healthy place, I was able to hear the impact and reflect on it. That discomfort, when you meet it with authenticity, it builds trust. Not right away and not smoothly, but it builds trust. I had to stop needing to control how others perceive me, and instead ask questions like, is this true? Is it kind? Is this mine to own?
Leadership born not from certainty, but from congruence.
And that's what made space for me to grow into leadership. Because honestly, back when Suzette was born and I got my master's degree, I was depressed. There was nothing about leadership that looked like me. I wasn't type A, I was not super decisive, I obviously was not comfortable with conflict. But over time, I started to see that if I can stay in hard conversations with humility and clarity, I can lead. I can sit across from a principal or a parent and say, we'll figure this out together. Or, I'm sorry, I was wrong. Even being firm, when it's rooted in love, it's not unkind. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do is just hold boundaries with kindness. And sometimes stepping off the stage and observing from the audience gives us a better perspective on the conflict. And sometimes those scripts do need to be rewritten. So here's your nudge. Where is conflict still triggering you? Start there. Unpack maybe what was modeled for you. What keeps repeating? How do you stay curious about this rather than controlled? Preschool Papa here. I work with a lot of big humans, and it seems like we all struggle with conflict. A lot of it started when we were little and what was modeled for us. Remember, we don't learn from what we hear, we learn from what we see. So for a lot of big humans out there, my encouragement to you is look to those little humans in your world and show them honesty and kindness can exist even in conflict. Model curiosity when tensions arise. Show that conflict doesn't have to mean danger. It can also mean depth.
'Cause they just don't know.
Another reel for the shelf.
Field note 191.47. Subject is no longer seeking to control others' perceptions. Conflict becomes a classroom.